When you think about the moments you've been the most frustrated, most angry, or most bothered, almost every single one of them has one thing in common. It wasn't actually about you. It was about what someone else said, did, or failed to do. And here's where the problem starts. The natural instinct is to want to control that person. You want them to apologize, to stop doing the thing that irritates you, to act how you believe they should act. But the more you chase that, the more powerless you feel, because people will never move in perfect rhythm with your expectations. The moment you start basing your peace on their behavior, you've already handed over control of your emotions. The real power is in flipping that script. Instead of obsessing over what someone else does, shift focus to what you do in response. That's the one part of the equation that belongs entirely to you. You can't control their tone, but you can control how much you let it sink in. You can't control their attitude, but you can control whether you match it or stay grounded. Think of it like a thermostat versus a thermometer. A thermometer reacts to the environment. If it's hot, it rises. If it's cold, it drops. But a thermostat sets the temperature. It doesn't just react, it regulates. And every single time someone tests your patience, you have the choice to either be the thermometer or the thermostat. What gets most people stuck is the belief that a strong response has to be loud, defensive, or forceful. But the truth is, your strongest response might just be a calm pause. That moment of hesitation before you react, that's your power zone. It's the space where you decide if their words deserve your energy, if their actions actually need your attention, or if you're better off letting it roll off your shoulders. The pause doesn't make you passive, it makes you precise, because now you're responding by choice, not by impulse. And when you respond by choice, you stay in control no matter how chaotic the other person is. Think about the last time someone tried to push your buttons. Maybe it was a family member bringing up something you didn't want to talk about, or a coworker being sarcastic. In that moment, you probably felt the heat rise inside you. That heat is the temptation to react, to clap back, to defend yourself, to match their energy. But if you can see that as your signal, not your sentence, everything changes. The signal is simply your body reminding you that your buttons are being pushed. The sentence is when you hand over your peace by reacting exactly how they wanted you to. Your job is to pause at the signal and remember that what they're doing is outside your control, but how you carry it afterward is completely yours. The best way to practice this control is to start small. Every day, there are dozens of little irritations. Someone cuts you off in traffic, your coffee order gets messed up, the internet runs slower than it should. These aren't life-changing, but they're opportunities to train yourself. Instead of snapping, sighing, or spiraling, take one breath and remind yourself, I can't control this person, I can't control this moment, but I can control how I walk through it. Over time, those small choices build into habits, and the more you practice, the easier it becomes to apply the same discipline in bigger, more heated situations. Another thing to remember is that control doesn't mean shutting down your feelings. You're human. You're going to feel frustration, irritation, maybe even anger at times. Control isn't about erasing those feelings. It's about managing what comes next. There's a big difference between feeling angry and being controlled by anger. The first is natural. The second is optional. When you allow yourself to acknowledge the feeling without acting on it, you've already won. You've proven that emotions are signals, not commands. You've proven that someone else's words or actions can't hijack your peace unless you open the door. And here's the bottom line. If you spend your life trying to control people, you will always be chasing. But if you spend your life mastering your responses, you'll always be leading. People will still say things you don't like. They'll still act in ways that test your patience. That doesn't stop. But what does change is your level of freedom, because now you're no longer waiting for the world to calm down before you feel calm. You're no longer waiting for someone else to act right before you feel right. Your peace is yours to keep because your response is yours to choose. Most people hear the word detachment and immediately think it means being cold, distant, or uncaring. But that's not what real detachment is. Real detachment is choosing not to let other people's actions or emotions control how you feel inside. It's the skill of staying calm even when everything around you feels tense. It's the decision to say, I don't need to jump into every fight, I don't need to carry every insult, and I don't need to take ownership of problems that aren't mine. That's not weakness, it's strength, because it takes more discipline to stay calm than it does to react. When you're detached in a healthy way, it doesn't mean you don't care about people. It means you care differently. You stop carrying their chaos as if it belongs to you. You stop letting their moods dictate your moods. Imagine someone throws a ball at you. You have two choices: catch it or let it drop. Most of us catch it without even thinking. We grab onto their frustration, their anger, their negativity, and suddenly it's ours. Detachment is the practice of letting the ball drop. You see it coming, you recognize it, but you don't pick it up. That's strength, because it means you're no longer letting someone else throw you off balance. One of the clearest examples of detachment is when someone tries to provoke you with an insult. The natural reaction is to defend yourself, argue back, or prove them wrong. But when you're truly detached, their words land differently. Instead of piercing your calm, they sound like background noise. You don't need to fight every insult because you've already decided that their opinion doesn't define you. That's where your strength shows. It takes almost no effort to react, but it takes incredible strength to hear something designed to hurt you and decide not to hand it any power. Detachment also gives you control in situations where emotions run high. Think about conflict at work or tension in your personal life. If you're fully invested in every word, every tone, every slight, you're going to be exhausted. But if you can step back and see the bigger picture, you gain perspective. Detachment allows you to look at the situation and say, this is about them, not about me. That shift in perspective keeps you from getting dragged into unnecessary drama. It lets you focus on solutions instead of reactions. And the more you practice it, the more you'll find yourself walking away from situations that once would have kept you up at night. It's important to remember that detachment is not avoidance. It's not pretending problems don't exist or ignoring people you care about. It's about approaching problems without being controlled by them. Think about a doctor in an emergency room. If they became emotionally overwhelmed every time they saw pain, they wouldn't be able to help anyone. They have to detach, not because they don't care, but because caring too much in the wrong way would make them ineffective. That's what healthy detachment looks like in everyday life. It's not coldness, it's clarity. It's choosing to engage from a place of strength, not from a place of chaos. When you practice detachment, you also start to notice how much lighter life feels. You stop carrying grudges that weigh you down. You stop replaying conversations in your head, trying to think of what you should have said. You stop needing everyone to approve of you before you feel okay. And here's the powerful part. People will notice. They'll see that they can't rattle you the way they used to. They'll see that you're calmer, harder to provoke, more centered. And that shift often changes how they interact with you because people stop trying to push buttons when they realize the buttons don't work anymore. The truth is, detachment is one of the most freeing skills you can ever learn because it means you're no longer chained to the way other people behave. You're no longer dragged up and down by their moods, their insults, or their bad days. Instead, you hold your ground. You keep your calm. You stay in control. That's why detachment isn't weakness, it's strength in disguise. It's the quiet power of knowing that no matter what storms are happening outside of you, the inside of you stays steady. When most people hear the word boundaries, they think of walls, distance, or shutting people out. But that's not what healthy boundaries are about. A boundary is not a punishment, it's protection. It's not about controlling someone else. It's about controlling how close their behavior can get to your peace. Think of it like having a fence around your house. The fence doesn't mean you hate your neighbors. It just means you get to decide who comes through the gate and on what terms. Boundaries work the exact same way with your emotions, your time, and your energy. A big mistake people make is thinking boundaries are about changing the other person. That's why so many people avoid setting them. They don't want conflict. They don't want to seem controlling. They don't want to start an argument. But boundaries aren't about demanding that someone else changes. They're about you deciding what you will and won't tolerate, and then following through on that. You can't stop someone from being negative, rude, or disrespectful, but you can decide how much access they get to you when they act that way. That's where your power is, and that's how you protect your peace. The real strength of boundaries is that they give you clarity. Without them, you end up in constant frustration. You feel drained, taken advantage of, or resentful because you're letting people cross lines you've never drawn. But once you establish a boundary, everything becomes clearer. People know what's acceptable with you and what's not. And you know that if they cross it, you don't have to explode, argue, or defend yourself. You just act on the boundary you already set. That clarity keeps you calm because now you're not scrambling to figure out what to do in the heat of the moment. Here's the truth. Boundaries are not about pushing people away. They're about letting the right people come closer. Because when someone respects your boundaries, it shows you they value your peace, your time, and your well-being. And when someone refuses to respect them, it tells you just as much. Boundaries aren't just for the tough conversations. They're filters that reveal who is safe for your energy and who is not. That's why they're not punishments. They're safeguards. They keep the wrong behaviors out while protecting the right relationships inside. Think of how many situations could be handled differently if you had clear boundaries. A friend constantly shows up late and it leaves you feeling unimportant. Without boundaries, you keep saying, "It's fine," even though it's not. With boundaries, you calmly explain that your time matters, and if they can't respect that, you'll meet up less often, or take a coworker who dumps extra work on you. Without boundaries, you quietly resent them and burn out. With boundaries, you firmly say, "I don't have the capacity to take this on." Notice something important here. The boundary is never about controlling them. It's about controlling what you allow and how you respond. Another benefit of boundaries is that they free you from guilt. A lot of people think saying no makes them selfish or harsh, but the opposite is true. Clear boundaries actually make you healthier for the people around you, because when you protect your peace, you show up calmer, more present, and more grounded. When you're exhausted, resentful, or angry, nobody gets the best version of you. Boundaries ensure that when you give your time and energy, it's not out of obligation or resentment, it's out of choice. And choice is what makes your giving genuine instead of forced. So if you've ever felt bad about setting boundaries, remember this: boundaries are not punishments. They are not about making someone else feel small. They are about protecting your own well-being and keeping your peace intact. You don't need to apologize for protecting your peace. And you don't need to feel guilty for not allowing someone's behavior to drain you. Because at the end of the day, boundaries aren't about pushing people out. They're about keeping your peace in. When something frustrates you, the natural reaction is to see it as a direct attack on your peace. Someone cuts you off in traffic, someone makes a sarcastic comment, someone ignores your effort, and immediately you feel it rising in your chest. But here's where reframing comes in. Reframing is the ability to step back and ask yourself, what else could this mean? Instead of locking yourself into one story, that they disrespected you, that they don't care, that they wanted to hurt you, you give yourself another angle. And that second angle is often the difference between stewing in irritation and moving on with indifference. Reframing doesn't excuse bad behavior. It doesn't mean people get a free pass. What it does is keep you from carrying their actions around longer than you need to, because the real damage usually isn't what someone does in the moment. It's the replaying afterward. You drive home still thinking about what that driver did. You lie in bed still hearing that sarcastic comment. You waste hours of your own peace because you never shifted the perspective. Reframing stops that cycle. It's not about denying what happened, it's about deciding how much power you'll let it keep. One of the easiest ways to reframe is to assume that what someone does says more about them than it does about you. The person cutting you off in traffic, maybe they're running late to pick up their kid. The coworker who snaps at you, maybe they're overwhelmed and not managing stress well. The stranger who throws shade online, maybe they're hurting in their own life. That doesn't mean what they did was right, but it does mean it doesn't have to live in your head as a personal attack. When you shift the story from "they disrespected me" to "they're dealing with their own stuff," suddenly the irritation loses its grip. Reframing also works in bigger conflicts. Think about disagreements with family or friends. Without reframing, every word feels sharp. Every disagreement feels like betrayal. With reframing, you realize they might just have a different lens, a different upbringing, a different way of seeing the world. That doesn't make them right, but it makes them human. And when you remind yourself that people are complex, not villains, you stop taking their behavior so personally. That's where indifference comes in. Not cold indifference, but peaceful indifference, the kind that says, I don't need to carry this because it's not about me. Another powerful reframe is asking, will this matter a year from now? Most irritations won't even matter a week from now, yet in the moment, they feel like the biggest deal in the world. That's the trick of irritation. It magnifies the small until it feels huge. But when you zoom out, you realize how little space it deserves. Reframing with time perspective takes the weight off. What feels like an attack today becomes a blip tomorrow. And once you see that, you can let go faster instead of dragging it with you. Reframing doesn't mean you'll never feel irritated again. You will. The key is how quickly you catch yourself. The moment you feel that spike of anger or annoyance, that's your signal to pause and ask, what else could this mean? Even if you don't know the full story, even if you're just giving someone the benefit of the doubt, you've already shifted. And that shift is where your power is. Because irritation thrives on a single narrative, the one that says you were wronged. Indifference grows when you remind yourself there's always another explanation. So the next time you feel that irritation building, don't just accept the first story your mind gives you. Challenge it, reframe it. Ask yourself if it's really about you or if it's just about them. Ask yourself if it will matter a year from now or if it'll be forgotten by tomorrow. That's how you turn irritation into indifference. Not by ignoring reality, but by choosing a perspective that protects your peace. Silence is one of the most underestimated forms of strength. Most people believe that winning an argument means having the sharpest comeback or proving the other person wrong on the spot. But the truth is, silence can do what words never will. It keeps you in control. When you refuse to be dragged into unnecessary conflict, you show more strength than the loudest response ever could. Silence doesn't mean weakness, it means discipline. It means you've decided your peace matters more than proving a point. And that's how you win an argument you never had to fight. Self-control is the partner to silence, because silence without control just feels like bottled up frustration. But when you practice genuine self-control, silence becomes a choice, not a forced reaction. You're not holding your tongue while boiling inside. You're calm enough that the urge to lash out doesn't own you anymore. That's where real victory lies. The ability to sit across from someone who's trying to provoke you and remain steady is power. It's showing that their chaos doesn't pull you out of character. And that steadiness often says more than any speech you could deliver. Think about the last heated moment you were in. Maybe someone accused you of something unfair, or maybe they twisted your words. Everything inside you wanted to jump in, correct them, explain yourself. But what happens when you do? You feed the fire, you hand them more fuel to keep it going. Silence is different. Silence starves the fire. It gives them nothing to grab onto, nothing to escalate, nothing to twist. It's not about ignoring them. It's about choosing not to give them free rent in your head or your energy. What makes silence so powerful is that it shifts the dynamic. Arguments are like a tug of war. One person pulls, the other pulls back, and the tension keeps building. But if one side simply lets go of the rope, the whole game ends. That's what silence does. It removes you from the tug of war entirely. The other person can keep pulling, but with no resistance, there's no competition left. And without competition, there's no argument. That's how you win without fighting, by refusing to play a game that drains you of your peace. Now, silence doesn't mean you avoid every conversation or swallow your needs. It means you choose your battles wisely. Not everything deserves a reaction. Not every comment needs an answer. Some things are better handled by action, not words. For example, someone keeps being disrespectful. Your silence may come with a boundary. You stop engaging. You limit your access. You protect your peace without debating it. That's not passive. That's decisive. Silence combined with action is one of the most effective forms of communication you have. Self-control also protects your credibility. When you react emotionally, you often say things you don't mean, or you give people ammunition to use against you. But when you stay calm, you keep your power. People notice the one who stays composed. They see the difference between someone who loses it and someone who holds it together. And the one who holds it together is the one who gains respect in the long run. That respect doesn't come from winning arguments. It comes from showing you don't need to fight to be secure in yourself. The more you practice silence and self-control, the freer you become, because now you're not walking into every conversation feeling like you have to defend yourself. You're not wasting hours replaying arguments in your head, wondering